there is a woman who comes to mind to each one of us. Of course, it'll be different, but each one knows of a woman who has a lot of these qualities. Cody?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Years ago, a young mother was making her way across the hills of South Wales, carrying her tiny baby in her arms, when she was overtaken by a blinding blizzard. She never reached her destination, and when the blizzard had subsided, her body was found by searchers beneath a mound of snow. But they discovered that before her death, she had taken off her outer clothing and wrapped it around her baby. And when they unwrapped the child, to their great surprise and joy, they found he was alive and well. She had mounded her body over his and given her life for her child, proving the depths of her motherly love. Years later, that child, David Lloyd George, grown to manhood, became the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and to many, one of the greatest statesmen Britain had. Another story. A teacher asked a boy a question. Suppose your mother baked a pie, and there were 7 of you, your parents and 5 children. What part of the pie would you get? A 6th, replied the boy. Well, I'm afraid you don't know your fractions very well, said the teacher. Remember, there are 7 of you. Yes, teacher, said the boy, but you don't know my mother. Mother would say she didn't want any pie. And finally, this one might be my favorite. A little boy forgot his lines in a Sunday school presentation. His mother was in the front row to prompt him. She gestured and formed the words silently with her lips, but it did not help. Her son's memory was blank. Sure, we've all been there. Finally, she leaned forward and whispered the cue to him. I am the light of the world. The child beamed and with great feeling and a clear, loud voice said, my mother is the light of the world. Moms sure are something else, right? The love of your mom can make the world a brighter, happier place when you're growing up. And growing up, your mom is almost like the sun. She just shines. She's the brightest light in your life. Moms are our first and greatest examples of warmth and self-sacrificial love growing up. Often they're the heart and the soul of their families. So loving and kind, so giving, often placing themselves very dead last, or giving all of themselves for their kids. There's a reason that studies have shown that when women have heart attacks, they're often more fatal than men. The studies showed it was because when women got symptoms of a heart attack, which are really weird for women, they would ignore them and put them off until they had taken care of everyone else first. Moms are important. They always leave a mark. They can be a source of love and comfort, or sadly for some, a deep, deep wound. I pray that you're like me, and the mark left was a good one. I'm the man I am today, partly, in a large part, really, due to my mother's love and guidance. And I'm sure that's true for many people here. I have so many warm memories of my mom. Hours spent together sitting and coloring. Family movie nights, playing board games, Monopoly, which I loved then but hate now. Going skating, tobogganing, wrestling, playing hide and seek, prayer times and family devotional and meals together. Sheltering in my mom's arms when I was scared, and suddenly knowing that everything would be okay. Raise your hand if you were greatly impacted by your mother. I mean, it should be everybody. Raise your hand if you think they're often underappreciated. Now, in case you didn't know, it's Mother's Day. So, happy Mother's Day. Mothers deserve our gratitude. Whether you are blessed enough to be a biological mother or a spiritual mother, thank you for all you do. In the church, there are a lot of Mother's Day sermons based on Proverbs 31. Proverbs 31 is a woman's text, after all, right? Churches and preachers around the world will often use Proverbs 31, praising women for living up to just an incredible standard. Even though deep down every woman knows they really don't. Even worse, in some toxic situations, some present Proverbs 31 as a to-do list for how a real godly woman will act. Even though every woman knows she can't live up to this. Now, it's sad and tragic, but some of these sermons can very easily create a works righteousness, where women try to measure themselves against the text. And in some cases, it can become oppressive to women, causing women to feel that they have to compete with an unreasonable standard in order to be a pleasing wife. Good news. I'm not going to do any of that today. But I do think we actually really need to re-examine Proverbs 31, starting with the intended audience. Proverbs 31, verses 1 through 9, which Vern skipped this morning, says, "The words of King Lemuel, a pronouncement that his mother taught him. What should I say, my son? What son of my womb? What son of my vows? Don't spend your energy on women or your efforts on those who destroy kings. It is not for kings, Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine or for rulers to desire beer. Otherwise you will drink, forget what is decreed, and pervert justice for all the oppressed. Give beer to one who is dying and wine to one whose life is bitter. Let him drink so that he can forget his poverty and remember his troubles no more. Speak up for those who have no voice, for the justice of all who are dispossessed. Speak up, judge righteously, and defend the cause of the oppressed and needy." So, we've often acted as though Proverbs 31 was directed at women. But Proverbs 31 verse 1 says, according to the ESV, "The words of King Lemuel, an oracle his mother taught him." And then verses 2 through 9 are an exhortation about wise leadership and warnings against excess. And then in verses 10 through 31, his mother tells King Lemuel the sort of woman he should find. Originally, Proverbs 31 was written as an exhortation to King Lemuel and all men on the sort of woman they should pursue. Not a to-do list for women. We've been aiming at the wrong audience. Perhaps this should really be more of a Father's Day sermon. But let's continue anyway. Proverbs 31, 10 through 20. The type of woman that men should be pursuing. Who can find a wife of noble character? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will not lack anything good. She rewards him with good, not evil, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax, working it with willing hands. She is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from far away. She rises while it's still night and provides food for her household and portions for her female servants. If this is a to-do list, I feel bad for women, by the way. I don't want to get up while it's still dark. She evaluates a field and buys it, planting a vineyard with her earnings. She draws on her strength and reveals that her arms are strong. She sees that her profits are good and her lamp never goes out at night. She extends her hands to the spinning staff, and her hands hold the spindle. Her hands reach out to the poor, and she extends her hands to the needy. She is not afraid for her household when it snows, for all in her household are doubly clothed. She makes her own bed coverings. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known at the city gates, where he sits among the elders of the land. She makes and sells linen garments. She delivers belts to the merchants. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she can laugh at the time to come. Her mouth speaks wisdom, and loving instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the activities of her household and is never idle. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also praises her. Many women have done noble deeds, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord will be praised. Give her the reward of her labor, and let the works praise her at the city gates. Again, that sounds just like an impossible standard to reach. Does it not? Just as we've gotten the audience wrong, I think there are actually some clues that we have misunderstood the identity of the woman being talked about. We read in verse 3, "Do not give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings." That's ESV. I like the language of CSB, which says, "Don't spend your energy on women and your efforts on those who destroy kings." Now, it seems really strange to me that King Lemuel's mother tells him not to waste his energy on women, and then in verse 10 starts talking about pursuing a woman. That seems to be the first clue. Something is not lining up quite right. Proverbs 31:10 summarizes her as a woman of Hayil. Often this is translated as excellent or noble. But the word most often refers to valor or military might. In other words, she isn't some meek woman who quietly stays at home cooking and doing laundry. To quote Dr. Ashley Hibbard, this is a discerning, capable woman who knows how to make and execute her plans. This woman is not only the equal of any man, she is the equal of a king. Now, this is not exactly the kind of characteristics that most men wanted in their women back then, to be honest. So some weird criteria here. This woman of valor actually sounds like a woman we've encountered before in the book of Proverbs. The first 9 chapters of Proverbs are in the voice of a father. In chapters 5 through 6, he gives 2 warnings to his son against adultery. And then in chapter 7, the father gives a 3rd warning focusing on what many Bibles title the adulteress, describing her as, in verse 5, foreign and different. Verse 13, given to lust. 16 through 17, given to excess. And then in verse 27 of chapter 7, she causes the death of the one who follows her. Chapter 8, in contrast, turns to wisdom, depicting wisdom as an often neglected woman who can be found anywhere, whether on the highways or in the city gates, waiting to instruct any man who will listen to her. She is Chokmah, or Lady Wisdom. Wisdom personified as a woman. What she has to offer is better than the most valuable of material possessions. According to 8 verses 10 through 11, what she has to offer is more valuable than silver, gold, and jewels. Here we read that wisdom is worth more than jewels. And then in Proverbs 31 verse 10, we read of a woman worth more than jewels. The clues that we've discussed, and there are more, but we'd be here a while. The clues we've discussed and the similarity between these women suggests that it's not actually a wife being discussed in Proverbs 31, but wisdom itself. King Lemuel's mother is herself wise enough to know that while her son's choice of a wife is important, it actually pales in comparison to the first woman he should pursue and marry, so to speak. Lady Wisdom. Lady Wisdom is the sort of woman that Lemuel and all men should pursue. Wisdom is the wife fit for a king. She will feed the servants. She will help with the land considerations. She will provide for the poor and for the family and make it so that the household can laugh at whatever's to come. Lady Wisdom will give him wisdom in his judgments, according to verse 23. Proverbs 31 is actually the sort of wisdom to which all people should aspire. to which all leaders especially should seek to bind, to marry themselves to. Good news and bad news to the women and the mothers here. Proverbs 31 is probably not a list that you are meant to compare yourself to. The only standard that you have to meet is the standard of Christ himself, which is both good news and maybe bad news because his standard is maybe even higher. But it's also simpler. Anyway, Proverbs 31 is the wisdom we should all aspire to. Now, thankfully, the Bible actually tells us how to go about attaining this wisdom. Proverbs 1 verse 7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and fools despise wisdom and discipline." The key feature distinguishing biblical wisdom from its worldly counterparts is the fear of God. We find numerous verses about that in Proverbs. For example, Proverbs 2 verse 5 says, "Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and discover the knowledge of God." Proverbs 9:10 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." Now, what is the fear of the Lord? It's actually pretty nuanced, but in part, it is reverence and awe for God. There's more to it than that, but that's like the key there. Deuteronomy 10 verse 12 says, "And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you, except to fear the Lord your God by walking in all of his ways, to love him and to worship the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul." Fear of the Lord is expressed by walking in all of his ways, by loving him, and by serving him with all our heart and soul. To fear God means to acknowledge his power and authority. To fear God means to adopt a godly lifestyle out of respect for him. And the one who fears God makes moral choices that reflect the character of God. This is the key feature of biblical wisdom. Living a godly lifestyle out of fear or reverence, awe, and love for God. There are different types of wisdom in the Bible. Now, the basic word group expressing the idea of wisdom in the Old Testament is called hakam. Now, it expresses a person's approach to life, but it also is used to describe the wedding of knowledge and experience so that one gains skill and becomes wise. So, remember, fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. Pairing that with our life experience is how one gains skill and becomes wise. So the wise person, then, is the one who is sensitive to God and willingly subjects himself or herself to him. The wise person is the one who goes on to apply divine guidelines in everyday situations and, guided by God's will, makes daily choices. It's only in combining the Lord's words and our experience that true wisdom can be found. So the wise person approaches life in relationship to God. And then we come to the New Testament. The New Testament actually identifies Jesus himself as God's power and wisdom. 1 Corinthians 1 verse 24 says, "Yet to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. Because God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength." Jesus is God's wisdom lived out. Wisdom in the New Testament still focuses heavily on the same practice of a godly life as in the Old Testament. And Jesus shows us what that looks like lived out. Things like turning the other cheek, loving your neighbor as yourself, dying to self, sacrificing self, loving your neighbor as yourself. Wisdom is the divine perspective that Jesus brings, applied by believers to the issues of their lives. Wisdom is always trying to live a godly life in every situation, motivated by a reverence and love for God, and viewing each and every situation through Jesus' example and making decisions based upon that. That's a lot of information. So, what does it come down to practically for me and you today? First of all, some general advice. Read the book of Proverbs. It is a lot of wisdom in practice. It is great. And then, when making a decision, any decision, whether it's about what to say to someone, how to respond to something, what to do, ask yourself these three questions. Is this godly? Is this motivated by love for God and a desire to obey Him? And is this something Jesus would do if He were me? Our situation is different than the situation Jesus was in. So it's easy to ask, what would Jesus do looking at the Bible? But let's bring it to now. What would Jesus do if He were me in my situation? Proverbs 31 tells men that the woman we need to pursue is wisdom. And that applies to women as well. Wisdom is the partner that we all need. God's wisdom is worth pursuing. And it may seem like foolishness to the world, but it is the key to truly living well in this world. As we strive to view every situation in life through the example of Jesus and with the fear of the Lord in mind, we will rise above any situation. We will learn how to make informed, intellectual decisions. We will learn how to make emotionally healthy decisions. We will learn how to make spiritually sound decisions. Ultimately, we will become wise. Now, sadly, we won't grow completely wise overnight. Believe me, I wish it. Every day I wake up, can I be wiser today? We'll see. This takes time, and it takes practice learning to view the world this way. The good news is that God wants us to grow in wisdom, and He'll help us do it. James 1:5 says, "Now if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him." Ask for wisdom, and you'll get it. You might not become the most wise person in the world overnight, but gradually you will become wiser. Now, I need all the wisdom I can get, especially now that I have 3 kids. I hope I'm not alone in wishing for more. You can never have too much wisdom. There are people here far wiser than me. But don't stop growing wiser. You can never have too much. So let's consciously practice viewing the world in this way. Let's ask God for more wisdom. Pray with me. Dear Lord, we understand that wisdom is something you want us to pursue. We also see that you promise to give it to any who ask. So I ask and hope that all here with me ask with me, that you would grant us all more wisdom. The wisdom to know how to live a godly life, to navigate the ever-changing cultures and social realities that we live in, and to know how and when to speak about you to our friends, our family, and strangers we meet. Make us a people known for our wisdom and our love. In Jesus, the one and only Christ's name, amen.
Thank you, Cody. Great reminder.